Ever find yourself hitting that buy now button online and,
Wondering, how does this actually, work?
yeah,
Today we're diving into the origins of a revolutionary idea
okay.
that's changing how we think about money itself, Bitcoin.
Wow.
We're tackling the OG Bitcoin paper, the one that started it all, penned by the mysterious Satoshi Nakamoto.
This paper is groundbreaking, even if you aren't, a tech whiz or anything.
Right.
We'll break down the core concepts of Bitcoin and really understand why it sent shockwaves through the world of finance.
You know how much we rely on banks and credit card companies for online transactions, right?
Right.
This paper dives right into those trust issues.
Exactly. Nakamoto highlights the vulnerabilities of our current system, the reliance on middlemen, the risk of fraud, the added costs. It all boils down to trust. Bitcoin aims to eliminate that need for trust entirely
Okay, color me intrigued. How does it pull that off?
through some seriously clever cryptography.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine instead of a bank keeping tabs on your money, each Bitcoin transaction is like a digital packet being signed for as it's passed from person to person, creating a public record of ownership.
Hmm.
And instead of one central authority,
Uh-huh.
a whole network of computers keeps track of everything.
So it's like a giant digital game of hot potato, but you can actually track where the potato's been.
That's a great way to put it.
Wow.
Each owner digitally signs off verifying the transaction before it moves on. This creates a transparent trail of ownership that anyone can check.
Okay, I'm following so far, but what stops someone from making a copy of their Bitcoin potato and spending it twice?
That's the million-dollar question and exactly the problem Nakamoto tackles.
Yeah.
In the traditional system, banks prevent this double spending.
Right.
But Bitcoin does it without a central authority.
All right, I'm all ears. How do you stop double spending without someone in charge?
Nakamoto proposed a radical solution, a public announcement system for every single transaction.
Huh.
Forget a bank ledger picture, a digital ledger called the blockchain that everyone on the network can see.
So it's like a public bulletin board where every Bitcoin transaction gets posted.
You got it.
Okay.
This public record is constantly being updated and verified by tons of computers.
Wow.
But there's a clever twist.
Okay.
To ensure everyone agrees on the order of transactions, Bitcoin uses something called a timestamp server and proof of work.
This is where it gets really fascinating.
Yeah.
Timestamp servers, proof of work. It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It might sound complex, but it's an ingenious solution.
Okay.
Picture this, a global network of computers constantly competing to solve complex math problems.
A math competition for computers.
Yeah.
What's the prize?
The prize is the power to add the next block of transactions to that public ledger, the blockchain. The first computer to crack the code wins.
Hold on. So it's like a giant digital Sudoku puzzle,
Yeah.
and the winner gets to update the Bitcoin transaction log? That's wild.
That's a pretty good analogy.
Yeah.
This whole process is what we call proof of work,
Okay.
and it's the secret sauce behind Bitcoin security.
Okay. I'm going to need you to spell that out for me. How does a math competition equal a secure system?
Because it levels the playing field. With thousands of computers competing, no single entity can control the network.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it. To tamper with a past transaction, you'd have to redo the work for every single block after it outpacing the entire network.
And with new blocks being added all the time,
Yeah.
that's practically impossible, like
Right.
trying to outrun a tsunami, right?
Exactly. The beauty of decentralization is that it removes the reliance on a single point of failure.
Right.
And this proof of work system is the engine that makes it all tick.
That's brilliant. But I have to ask, who are these digital miners dedicating so much computing power to Bitcoin?
Right.
What's in it for them?
Well, you know how gold miners were rewarded for their efforts.
Yeah.
It's a similar concept with Bitcoin.
So there's a digital pot of gold waiting for the fastest calculator.
In a way, yes, miners who successfully add a block to the blockchain receive newly created Bitcoins as a reward.
Okay.
It's built right into the system's design as outlined in the paper.
Now it's starting to make sense. So it's this ingenious feedback loop.
Yeah.
Miners secure the network,
Yeah,
and in return, they get rewarded with Bitcoin.
precisely.
All right.
Anything. And to sweeten the deal, there are also transaction fees.
Okay.
These fees are added to the reward, incentivizing miners to prioritize certain transactions.
This is fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
But let's talk about privacy for a second. If all these transactions are public,
Right.
doesn't that seem a bit well exposed?
That's a question many people have. But this is where Bitcoin gets really interesting. It actually offers a surprising level of privacy through the use of public and private keys.
Okay, I think I'm going to need an analogy for this one.
Think of it like sending a message to a secure mailbox. Anyone can send a message to the mailbox, but only the person with the private key can open it and read its contents.
So it's like a secret code that only the sender and receiver know about?
Exactly. You can see the transaction happen, but you don't know who sent it or received it unless they choose to reveal their identities.
Wow, that's pretty clever.
Yeah.
So Bitcoin gives you a degree of anonymity, which is definitely reassuring in today's digital age.
Right. And while the paper acknowledges that some level of transaction linking is unavoidable overall, Bitcoin manages to strike a good balance between transparency and anonymity.
This whole system is honestly blowing my mind.
Oh,
But I have to ask about the elephant in the room,
sure.
security. What happens if someone manages to amass enough computing power to control a majority of the network?
Yeah.
Couldn't they wreak havoc? That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? Could someone hijack the whole system if they had enough computing power?
Nakamoto addresses that very concern in the paper.
Yeah.
It's not as simple as just having the most powerful computers. Remember, the rules of Bitcoin are hard-coded into the system itself.
So even with a majority of the network's computing power, someone couldn't just mint 1 trillion Bitcoins out of thin air.
Exactly. They'd be stuck playing by the rules embedded in the code. However,
Yeah.
they could potentially try to game the system in other ways.
Like, what's the worst-case scenario here?
The most likely attack would be something called a double spend.
Okay.
Imagine buying something with Bitcoin, then rewinding the blockchain to erase that transaction and get your Bitcoin back.
Ah.
It's like having a magical rewind button on your digital wallet.
Okay. That does sound like a recipe for chaos,
Right.
but wouldn't the network flag that as suspicious?
Absolutely. That's why an attacker would need to create their own version of the blockchain one where the double spend looks legitimate, and they'd need to do it faster than the rest of the network.
So they're essentially racing against the entire Bitcoin network.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the more blocks that get added to the real blockchain, the harder it becomes to catch up and overtake it. The paper describes this as a losing battle for the attacker.
So the takeaway here is the longer Bitcoin exists and the more people use it, the more secure it becomes.
That's one of the key takeaways from this paper, yes. It's the power of a decentralized, distributed system.
Right.
There's no single point of failure, which makes it incredibly resilient.
This has been eye-opening. I had no idea there was so much complexity behind Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But in a way, it all comes back to that initial idea of trust, or rather lack of it.
It's a fascinating paradox. We're so used to trusting central authorities, but Bitcoin proposes a system where we don't have to.
Right.
It's a fundamental shift in how we think about money and transactions.
A true game changer. Well, I'd say this deep dive has definitely given us a lot to think about.
It has.
From digital signatures to proof of work, Satoshi Nakamoto really thought of everything.
It's a testament to the power of innovative thinking and the potential for technology to disrupt even the most established systems.
You know, reading this paper makes you wonder about Satoshi himself.
Yeah.
A mysterious figure who revolutionized finance and then seemingly vanished into thin air. Makes you think, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah, fascinating stuff.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive, but we'll be back next time with another fascinating look at the world of Bitcoin.